Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. I am Joe Sarvati, affectionately known as Coach, and I am joined by our two NFL pros here at Coach Talk, Mr. Josh Crash Davis and Mr. Stephen Miller. We are here today to discuss the top 10 running backs for your upcoming fantasy season long, whether it be best ball, your, like I say, year-long leagues, dynasty leagues. We're going to give you what we feel are going to be your top 10 running backs statistically and that are going to get you to the championship in your leagues. So how are you guys doing today? Crash, how are you?
I'm doing well, Coach. Doing well. Ready to look at these running backs for 2022. There's a lot of really good running backs. I don't know if I realized how many. So it was hard to come up with just 10.
There's no doubt. There's some breakout guys this year, but I can tell you, I bet you we're going to have a consensus number one. That's what I think.
Yeah.
What do you think, Steven?
I think it's a very difficult year for the running backs. So I kind of put my list together in a certain way where I have it where the ability for each running back to get over 225 points for the season. And that's kind of how I based my top 10 off of.
Very nice. And of course, we're your one-stop shop for DFS sports, and we're going to take all of this information on these pre-shows and roll that up, and we'll do some DFS preseason podcasts for you as well. So enjoy this. We've got our top two guys here, and we're going to dive right into this. If you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, give us a quick thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and hit the alert button so you know when any podcasts like this go live or are posted. And then if you're watching on TikTok, a quick like and follow. And this way, same thing will pop up and you'll know when our information comes out. And we're going to have a really extensive NFL season for daily fantasy sports with our presenting sponsor for this podcast and all of our NFL podcasts, and that is Boom Fantasy. So here we go, Crash. We're going to, how about we let Steven go first this time? We had you go first for quarterbacks. So this time for the Boom Fantasy top 10 from 10 to 6, Steven Miller time. Miller, what do you got?
Well, you're going to realize that there's a lot of guys that are missing from this list, or you might think that's missing, but I left a lot of people off this list due to suspensions and history of injuries. So I'm very cautious of my top 10 guys.
Good.
But at number 10, I have Antonio Gibson. Last year, he was the 10th ranked running back. He's one of only 7 backs that have over 1,000 yards rushing last year. He averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game. He carried the ball over 250 times, had 43 receptions. So there's lots of volume. There's lots of opportunity there. This offseason, they brought in Carson Wentz from the Colts. He's more of a game manager, so I think it's going to be a perfect fit for Antonio Gibson. And this guy's big. He's 6'2", weighs 220 pounds, ran a sub 4.4 in the 40. And when he gets the ball, he's so explosive. And this guy played wide receiver in college. So he doesn't have the necessarily he hasn't been beat up like the other running backs in the NFL. So at 10, I have Antonio Gibson. At 9, I have Aaron Jones. Last year, he was 11th ranked running back. He averaged 15.3 fantasy points per game. He was second in rushing attempts last year behind A.J. Dillon. His workload was just under 15 touches per game. But this year, I see him being used in a different capacity due to the loss of Devontae Adams and A.J. Dillon splitting carries with him. I see him averaging a similar workload. However, I see him getting more touches in the passing game, especially in the beginning of the year. I think he's going to be around 1,400 scrimmage yards this year, which will make for a pretty solid fantasy season.
Nice.
At number 8, I have Ezekiel Elliott. I'm sure you'll like that.
All right.
There you go. Last year, he was the 7th ranked running back with 255 fantasy points and one of few running backs that played in all 17 games. He averaged 19.1 fantasy points weeks 1 through 5. And then he played through the rest of the games with a torn PCL. He had 12 touchdowns. It was the second best in his career. And a lot of people don't realize this, but the Cowboys are 12-5 last year, so they have a pretty good squad. This year, I see him kind of getting the same workload. They have the 6th easiest schedule for running backs. They have a great defense. They led the league in takeaways. It's going to be able to put their offensive unit into a lot more scoring positions. And I see them running the clock a lot when they have leads, and Elliott will benefit from that. And Jerry Jones loves his running backs, throughout his whole entire life. I mean, he takes pride in his running backs. So I have Ezekiel Elliott at 8. At 7, I'm going to go to Tampa. We're going to pick Leonard Fournette. Last year, he was the 6th ranked running back. He averaged 18.3 fantasy points per game, had a career high with 4.5 yards per carry, and he was big part of the passing game with 69 receptions. He's coming off his most productive season since his rookie year. He's no longer splitting carries with Ronald Jones and really has minimal competition for touches out of the backfield. He's a complete 3-down back who can run, catch, and pass block. And he's part of one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. So I have Leonard Fournette at 7.
Nice.
At 6, I brought in a rookie. I have Breece.
Wow.
Brought in Breece Hall. For the past 4 out of 5 years, a rookie's placed in the top 10 in football stats. The last time the Jets had a top 10 running back was 13 years ago. A guy named Thomas Jones, who finished with the number 6 ranking. This guy loves the end zone. He set an FBS record with 24 straight games with a touchdown. He was an All-American for the past 2 years. I mean, the guy's a complete stud. And, he ran a 4.39 in the 40. He had a 40-inch vertical. He's 5'11", 220 pounds, has great balance, vision, explosiveness. He's not afraid to drop his shoulders to go through the line. And he's already listed as the RB1 on the Jets depth chart. So, and they had some pretty good running backs last year with Michael Carter and Tyron Johnson and Tevin Coleman, and he's already ranked 1. I see him having around about 250 touches, 1,600 scrimmage yards, and double-digit touchdowns. He kind of reminds me of how Saquon Barkley was when he came out of college.
Wow.
So number 6 is Breece Hall.
Very nice. That is going to get a lot of controversial talk going. A rookie at number 6. Sticking with Zeke. I know Zeke's fallen out of everybody's top 10 now that they say Pollard's going to share the ball with him, but I like the courageous spot to keep him in there. Real quick, want to say hello to a couple folks that already hopped in. We're going live, so it's great to see. When I glanced over, I thought it said Jason Garrett. I said, oh, wow, he's watching. But it's Jason Garnett. What's up, Jason Garnett? Go Browns. No sympathy. And Dominic's in there. Our man Dominic, he's always with us. And a couple other folks jumping in as well. So this will have a long shelf life. It'll be up between now and the start of the season. So hopefully everybody gets a chance to jump in and take a look at it. All right. Crash, is your top 10 through 6 going to be as controversial as Mr. Miller here?
Well, let me just start it out with the 2 players that I don't have in my top 10 that I think is going to be controversial just to begin with.
Okay.
So the 2 players that I don't have in my top 10, one is Najee Harris. I think, he had a huge season last year, but they have a questionable quarterback situation now with Mitchell Trubisky and the rookie Kenny Pickett. So I think that the defenses are going to game plan around stopping him. And so he's fallen out of my top 10. The other one that's probably going to be very controversial because I've seen him in the top 3 in a lot of sites is going to be Christian McCaffrey. He's only played 7 in 3 games the last 2 years, and I don't want to risk a top 5 pick in my fantasy leagues for a guy that I don't trust to stay healthy.
Wow. Yeah, definitely those 2 I've heard in almost every list. So I'm interested to hear your 10 through 6. What do you have?
All right, number 10. So in the last 6 seasons, 12 rookie running backs have finished in the top 10 in fantasy football, which I'm going to start where Steve left off with Breece Hall. He's with the Jets with Zach Wilson, a second-year quarterback. They have a questionable receiving core, a lot of young guys, a lot of unproven guys, and I think they're going to rely heavily on Breece Hall, so he's going to be my number 10 running back. Number 9 is going to be Alvin Kamara. I think Jameis Winston will have a healthier season this year. He was a top 5 running back when Jameis Winston was in the lineup last year. So I've got Alvin Kamara at number 9. And Jason, I do have Nick Chubb. He's here at number 8.
Oh, nice.
With Baker Mayfield in Carolina and Deshaun Watson facing at least a 6-game suspension, I think the Browns are going to rely heavily on the run game this year, especially while Watson's out, which he could be out for the whole year. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But Chubb, unfortunately, has to split carries with Kareem Hunt, or he would have been a top 3 to top 5 running back for me. Number 7 is going to be DeAndre Swift of the Detroit Lions. I know the Lions added DJ Chark and Jamison Williams from Alabama in the draft, but I still think that Swift's going to be a big part of their offense. He's, not been able to stay fully healthy, so that's been a little bit of an issue for him his first 2 years in the NFL. So hopefully he can stay healthier this year and get a full 17 games in. But he had the second highest target share for running backs last year at 18.4%. So he is going to be my number 7 running back. Number 6 is going to be Aaron Jones. He was second in receptions for the Packers last year. And with Devontae Adams out of the lineup, he averaged 6 targets and 23 points per game in the PPR leagues last year.
Wow.
He would have been a top 3 running back for me if it wasn't for A.J. Dillon and the split carries there. But I do think Aaron Jones is going to be heavily involved in the passing game. So he is going to be my number 6 running back for 2022.
Very nice. And I'll tell you, the one theme that shows out here is what I expected as well, is everybody's lists are so different. I mean, running backs, the top couple are simple, but after that, it's just really a hard one because you've got guys that have been injured before. You have guys splitting carries. You have new people in new situations. It really is. It's probably going to swing a lot of your leagues is who you get, either as your top running back, if you have a mid to late draft choice in the round, or maybe your second one, if he's, they step up and get it done. Because wide receivers, there's a lot of them. And that list, we could make a top 20 and probably be comfortable with it. But running backs is a select group. There's no question about it. So welcome to the chat, David. We got a Giants fan in here, a Packers fan, Browns, 49ers. We got all kinds of teams repping here in the chat. All right, here we go to the top 5. Again, if you want to become a part of what we're doing at Coach Talk, by the way, go to dfscoachtalk.com. You can sign up there. We have an NFL package we're going to be announcing with the whole Boom Fantasy announcement coming up. But if you want to try us out, we have several memberships you can join in. Check out our baseball, NASCAR, MMA, all the fun stuff between now and when football gets going. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, quick thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. If you're on TikTok, a like and a follow, we'd really appreciate that. All right, here's the money picks. This is what's going to bring down some leagues as far as bringing the money home. Top 5, Mr. Stephen Miller Time Miller. What do you got? 5 through 1 running backs for the 2022 season.
All right, at number 5, I have Joe Mixon. Last year, he was the 4th ranked running back. He averaged 18 points and 21 touches per game and had career high in receiving yards. He had over 1,500 scrimmage yards and 16 touchdowns. This year, based on the offense that they got and the receivers, I seldomly see him going up against an 8-man box. In the offseason, they picked up Tom Brady's old center for New England, Ted Karras, who's going to anchor that line of scrimmage. I see a lot of benefit there. And even though the Bengals had one of the most prolific passing attacks in the NFL, they still rush the ball 40% of the time. So I don't see his volume changing. I see him having the same numbers from last year, and that's why I have him as my number 5. At 4, I have Najee Harris. He was the 3rd ranked running back last year. He had over 1,600 scrimmage yards, setting the Steelers' record for 81 touches. Led all running backs in receptions with 74. He was 2nd in the league in broken tackles, and he had 0 fumbles.
Wow.
This guy has always been awesome. He has the rushing record at Alabama, and he was the number 1 running back coming out of high school as well. So this guy just has been dominant his entire life. This year, he will be the bell cow of the Steelers again and have a massive amount of receptions again. His ability to recognize lane development before it happens, and he gets around the field with good bend and balance. It's pretty nice. His patience for blockers, and he steers the blockers into defenders to allow them to get those extra yards. and he reminds me of like a young Le'Veon Bell. And
Mhm.
really, based on the quarterback situation, they're going to rely heavily on the run game. At 3, I have a guy that I've had for the past 3 years in my lineup. I have Austin Eckler. He was the second ranked running back last year. He had 20 touchdowns, 70 receptions, and over 1,500 scrimmage yards. He had over 340 fantasy points. He was used brilliantly in the Joe Lombardi offense, an offense that had Alvin Kamara as a featured back, but wasn't overused, similar to how Eckler's being used. He's the quickest to the hole, and he always falls forward. This year, it's hard to imagine Eckler not landing in the top 3 in fantasy for running backs this year. To additions to both sides of the ball and another year under Justin Herbert's belt, I can see Eckler getting his first 1,000-yard rushing season and potentially a 1,000-yard receiving season. Wow. Something that hasn't been done in 3 years. The last person to do it was Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
So I see that happen. He's highly utilized in one of the most explosive offenses in the league. And this guy cares about fantasy football. He cares about people drafting him, cares about all that stuff. So that's just another reason why I actually love this guy.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's why I'm at my number 3. At number 2, I have King Henry, a.k.a. Spike, with that big thing that comes out of the back of his helmet. Or like Spike from Little Giants. Kind of reminds me of just the biggest guy on the field. You know,
Yeah.
He had almost 200 fantasy points within the first 8 games last year. He was still ranked the top running back after week 15. At 6'3", 250 pounds, he was the fastest ball carrier last year with almost 22 miles per hour. And with the release of A.J. Brown, Henry will get more volume. Last year, he averaged 27 touches a game, which is crazy. He's a punching runner. He wears down defenses throughout the game. Eventually, 8-man boxes, he's going to break through and break off for that 75-yard run that you see all the time. And someone gets stiff-armed into the kicking net and all that stuff. I mean, he's like one of my favorite guys for fantasy football. Like on a Monday night, you're down by 40. He's like a loose slot machine that just constantly getting points, and you're looking at your phone and the points are going up constantly. So I have Derrick Henry at my number 2. At 1, I have Jonathan Taylor. He was number 1 ranked running back last year. He had 20 touchdowns and over 2,100 scrimmage yards. In college, this guy had 6,000 yards rushing in a 3-year span, the most ever. He was only 400 yards away from breaking the record in college with only playing 3 years. He's a smart guy. He was going to go to Harvard before he decided to go to Wisconsin. This year, now with Matt Ryan as quarterback, who led the league in targets to running backs with almost nine attempts, I see Justin Taylor getting more involved in the passing game as well. He's a touchdown monster from all ranges, knows the offense in and out, all the offensive line blocking schemes, blitz packages, defensive fronts. He's a true 3-down back. He's a really smooth runner in and inside and out. He has the vision to set up defenders so they over pursue him and they fail, and he can make that cutback run. Just a really smart, high football IQ individual. And he has a great defense, and it's an easy division. I think he's going to push the record this year for all-time scrimmage yards in a season of 2,500 that was set back in 2009 by Chris Johnson. But that's why I have Jonathan Taylor as my number 1.
Yeah, he is awesome. I will say somewhere in there you called him Justin Taylor, and that made me laugh because I thought, let's disrespect Jonathan Taylor right off the bat. And if you're really desperate, take his twin brother Justin Taylor. No, I got it. You know, you're still a rookie on this team. We got to give you a hard time somewhere. Crash and I never make any mistakes or say any wrong names ever.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah,
I love it, man. And I'll tell you what, if you have the first or second pick, just take Taylor or Spike, as you called them. Those two guys are. I mean, I don't know how you don't take Taylor or Henry. I mean, they're just so stinking awesome.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm interested now, Crash. We're all excited to hear your 5 through 1 and see how many replications there are. I guarantee you there's at least 3. So we will see here. So for the 2022 season, your top 5, Crash, who do you have?
All right, number 5, I have the same guy. I got Joe Mixon, Cincinnati Bengals. He was 3rd in total touches and as well as goal line carries last year. He's one of the few running backs that gets to carry the workload without having to be in a split with another running back. And, the offensive line should be improved this year, as Steve mentioned. So I think that it's going to be another good year for Mixon in 2022. Number 4, I have Dalvin Cook, with Kevin O'Connell there as the head coach now, former offensive coordinator from the Super Bowl champion LA Rams. I think they're going to use him in a lot more creative ways. They've talked about this offseason, how they're going to move him all over the field. Last year, he averaged 21.8 touches per game and 106.4 total yards per game. So I expect a high usage amount for Dalvin Cook in this new offense under Kevin O'Connell at head coach. Number 3, I've got Derrick Henry. He was number 1, as Steve mentioned, in points per game in PPR leagues last year at 23.4 in the first 8 weeks of the season. He averaged a heavy workload with 29.6 touches per game before he got hurt. I think he's going to be a top 3 running back in 2022 and could easily challenge for the number 1 spot. Austin Eckler at number 2. He had the second highest target share for running backs last year and the second most receptions with 70. Only Najee Harris had more. And he also led the NFL with 18 red zone touchdowns, and he was second in red zone touches with 63. So look for another huge year from Austin Eckler. Number 1, I also have Jonathan Taylor. He led the NFL in red zone touches last year with 92. As Steve mentioned, he has the quarterback who had the most targets to running backs last year at 8.6 targets per game in Matt Ryan. I think he had 18 touchdowns rushing last year. I think he's going to have another 15 to 20 this year, and he'll probably have more than the 2 receiving touchdowns he had last year with Matt Ryan targeting him. Like I said, he targeted running backs more than anyone last year. So Jonathan Taylor is my number 1, but I really think any of those top 3 are going to be up there in the number 1, challenging for number 1. So that is my number 5 through 1 for 2022 running backs.
Very nice. And without question, I think, it is in any of your leagues, regardless of position, and we won't obviously be able to say this about any other position, but I think if you have the top 3 picks, not just the top 2, but the top 3, I think you take 3, running backs go 1, 2, 3 in almost all the drafts. I don't, to get a Taylor or Henry or Eckler, it's a layup. I mean, those 3 guys, unless I'm wrong, you guys tell me. I think they're heads and above anybody else. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll say unless you can get like a Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson are my leaders out of the clubhouse for wide receivers. So one of those 2.
Would you take one of those 2 over those 3 running backs, though?
Depends on how the board goes, with the people that are drafting in front of me. But probably not.
No, I'm saying if you and I and Steven have the top 3 picks in this draft, how do we not take those 3 running backs? That's me. I could be wrong.
Depends on maybe the amount of people in the league. If it's only a 12-team league, But I personally think having the top wide receiver is extremely important because they tend to not get as injured as much as a running back. So even though those 3 running backs are there and they're going to produce a lot, it's seldomly that a running back lasts 17 games, especially. I'd rather take that high volume receiver at number 1 personally.
Wow. Well, we'll see how it goes. And
it can definitely pay off. It can definitely pay off because last year my wife picked Cooper Kupp over Christian McCaffrey. So
injuries aside, let's just say that injuries are going to make all the difference in the world in fantasy sports. So
no injuries. If there was no injuries at all, there's a lot of other running backs like Raheem Mostert. If he stayed healthy all year long, I want him in my lineup. He's like a guaranteed guy in my lineup if he's playing that game.
There's some good guys that'll go towards the bottom of that first round like that, especially if it's a running back run. But it's a great lead into our next podcast, which we'll do next week, which is wide receivers. So for me, I'd go 1, 2, 3 running back, but these 2 guys here have some wide receivers, a couple that were mentioned a little bit already, but we'll certainly do the top 10 for next week to see who slides in there. But Man, it is really, it's all about staying healthy, all about having the opportunity. And I think this is going to be a really banner year for some of these guys. There's no doubt about it.
No, for
I
sure.
agree. Did you watch the Hall of Fame game, Steve?
I did watch the Hall of Fame. It's so hard to track those guys and to really see kind of how everything's going, but it was good. That Austin Walter guy played for the Jets last year. He got some playing time at the end, trying to make that roster. But last year for the Jets, there was a game he came in and the guy dominated. And his story is awesome too. He's like an undersized guy out of Rice and just but that's what I like about the preseason games. You get to see those guys that are trying to make the team and the guys that eventually make the roster and might come in week 6. So you just got to pay attention to those guys.
Yeah, it whets the appetite no matter what it is, who's playing. You see that first preseason game and you're like, all right, it's almost here, you know.
Yeah, the whistles, just all of it. Yeah.
Well, I'm an old school coach. You watch as much as you can. And I got to say, in the second half, I was checking the phone. I was on TikTok a little bit and I was drifting. It was painful at times.
It's hard.
But I'll tell you what I found in several years in watching these games. If you gut them out and watch them, it's not only the guys that make the roster, but it's guys that get cut at the last cuts and get signed to practice squads. And inevitably, halfway through the season, they get called up and say, wait a minute, saw that guy in preseason. He does this, he does that. Every edge you can get, I would recommend watching that stuff. There's no doubt about it.
For sure.
Yeah. I agree.
All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for jumping in live, too. We have Don in there now. David joined us, a couple other folks. So people are hungry for the NFL. It's getting closer and closer, and we're going to be your one-stop shop. We're really excited here at Coach Talk. We're going to be adding a lot of ownership percentages in, value percentages, top picks, looking at all the projections of the players, along with doing our podcasts each week to share that information. So we'd love to have you, dfscoachtalk.com. If you're checking this out again, quick thumbs up and subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. And we're going to have all kinds of NFL podcasts. And we're going live most of the time now. So you can jump in, ask any questions during these podcasts, and especially the big ones that we'll be doing during the week. For daily fantasy, you'll want to jump in because we can have instant feedback and give you that information in preparation for that week's game. So that is it, my friends. Mr. Josh Crash Davis, Mr. Stephen Miller Time Miller. For those gentlemen, I am Joe Sarvati, affectionately known as Coach. We'll catch you again next week when we look to break down the top 10 wide receivers for Boom Fantasy for the upcoming NFL season.